As the first rays of light break the horizon on the southeast coast of Dorset, the winter sun reveals the intriguing Victorian resort of Swanage. It's not often you come across a town of such charm and character. Nestled deep in the Purbeck Hills, this small seaside town, seemingly untouched by the outside world, attracts hundreds of thousands of tourists and holidaymakers every year. Although only a few miles from the bustling town of Bournemouth, Swanage still retains an island feel. Remote but exclusive. Accessible only by chain ferry, a long drive around Poole Harbour, or by the sea, Swanage is not somewhere you chance upon. In the depths of winter, the town sees few visitors. However, the ones that do brave the bracing cold winds and sometimes treacherous weather often have reasons for visiting that go beyond the traditional tourist attractions. With over 100 years of history, rising effortlessly over the waves and stretching some 200 metres out into the sea, this unique and attractive structure is Swanage Pier.
There's not many of these old piers left, and I think there's one or maybe two Victorian strolling piers that are just left for people to enjoy, for the feeling of wandering out to sea rather than arcades or this or that. So it's sort of quite a pure thing, really.
People quite tickled with the idea of strolling on the pier, but that was the old Victorian sign on the entrance of the pier in Victorian times: stroll on the pier for a penny. So we decided, being a Victorian pier, use the Victorian words. So it's always been known, strolling on the pier.
As the piermaster, Russ's main task is to keep the pier in a safe and usable order. Every morning he opens up the gates to the strollers, divers and fishermen who pay a toll to use the pier. The pier which stands strong today is the second of two built in the town. The original fell into disrepair many years ago. Known now as the Old Pier, it was built in the 1850s as a working pier for shipping stone out of Swanage. But soon the paddle steamer trade began, and this started to bring in day trippers to the town.
Swanage didn't have a proper pier to cope for this, whereas Bournemouth and Weymouth, the Isle of Wight and other places had these beautiful piers. The local stone merchants decided that they would build a proper pier so the boats could come in. Up to 10 paddle steamers a weekend used to come in, bringing thousands of people in.
Sadly, only one paddle steamer now remains. However, the Victorian charm of the pier is ever present. Iron handrails, lampposts and benches cast in the original 1896 moulds adorn the deck. The wind shelter at the end of the pier provides warmth and a welcome comfort, and has been rebuilt to look as glorious now as it might have 100 years ago. One regular visitor enjoys the feeling of keeping up tradition by using fishing equipment from the 1920s. However, it does have limitations.
With this reel, I can't cast out like you can on a modern reel. For a start, it would overrun and I'd end up with a bloody great bird's nest. And the other thing is, this rod, being it's so old, it's not as flexible as it was originally. So if I was to cast out hard, I'd probably break it. So that means I'm restricted to going to where the water's deeper. If I want to use this equipment, I've got to go on a pier. I'm not likely to catch anything today, but I just like it.
As Basil enjoys his traditional fishing experience, there's a strong connection between him and the pier he stands upon. His fishing rod is made of the same wood that provides the foundation for the pier, greenheart. 170 greenheart timber piles provide a strong base for the wooden deck to be laid upon. Although greenheart is renowned for its strength and durability, it's not indestructible, and it still has to be looked after.
Every 2 years we've got to go around and tighten up all the nuts and bolts, because the pier structure actually moves. It's designed to move in the storms. If it didn't, it would crack. And that's the reason why they're relatively stable in the sea, until they get attacked by the dreaded gribble, and that causes problems. But that's another thing altogether.
Restoration of the pier is an ongoing activity which usually takes place in the winter months. The chief enemy is the gribble worm, which eats its way through the timbers, often causing piles to have to be replaced. At a cost of over $150,000 a year, it's often a battle between time and money to get the pier ready for the peak season. "8,000 tiny brass plaques line the deck, each with its own individual story for all to read. For £50, anyone can buy their own plaque, and with a 30-character limit, write whatever they like. Stan O'Flynn comes to the pier every Sunday morning to lay the latest batch of plaques. With around 10 being put down each week, it's a popular attraction for many people.
It's quite exciting really, because some of them are quite interesting, and people do have some very good reasons for laying a plaque on the pier, whether it be, say, a wedding or a celebration, or they may have caught the largest fish in their life, There are many reasons why people do come on here, in a way as an excuse to have a plaque on Swanage Pier.
My mum and dad, they actually met on the pier because my dad was on the paddle steamers and steamers, and that's how they met and fell in love. So I thought it was very nice to have a plaque laid for them in memory of them.
Well, we're a group of motorcyclists from Dorchester. It's the second anniversary of the death of our friend who we got a plaque for. His name was Peter Balistrari, and he was killed on the Pier Regis Road.
He was just a good mate, so we mark this day because of that, you know.
This plaque is in memory of our son, one of our 4 sons, whom we lost 3 years ago, and we just find it very special. We enjoy coming over here approximately every month to polish it up. Well, it keeps us close, and I think I'd rather come and do this than perhaps put flowers on a grave, really.
This is probably one of the most important plaques on the pier. It refers to men of the 26th Infantry US 1st Division who were based here in Swanage prior to them departing from here to land on the Omaha beach on D-Day 1944. Unfortunately, of the group that left here, only one survived, and that one man came back and organised the plaque that we're now seeing on this seat. There are a number of plaques where in fact we do have to lift the plaque. This is where divorces have occurred and someone says they don't want their name next to that person's name ever again. So we have to react to that.
A well-known figure on the pier, Bob Campbell, is an ex-pier master and diving veteran who now devotes his time to collecting historic diving equipment.
I'm a local lad really, so I've been lived pretty well all my life here, and a lot of that time has actually been spent down on the pier. My grandfather was a fisherman, and as a boy I used to occasionally go out with his boat, and so all this environment around here, from what we call Coast Guard out by the lifeboat slip to the pier, was sort of bred into my entire upbringing. Well, nowadays, of course, I'm retired. I'm not an active trust member or pier master as I used to be. I just devote my time to my collection of antique diving equipment, restoring that, writing up about it for our Historical Diving Society magazine, and communicating with people worldwide in that respect, and that just keeps me occupied.
Since a young child, Bob spent much of his boyhood on and around the pier. In 1973, however, he witnessed a tragic accident, one that he'll never forget.
Well, I was coming in from diving, so I'd be late on a Sunday afternoon. Heard this roar from above me, looked up, and just up here, about 1,000 to 2,000 feet, was an aircraft. I couldn't recognise it then. I mean, I could see it had folded up its wings, and I thought, that's coming down. She'd struck the water about a quarter of a mile out, so I went out there to see if we could find anything. A friend of mine actually picked up the pilot's body. After we'd located the wreckage at the pier, we would bring in the stuff in through the gap here, simply by rope and tackle, hauled up the fuselage and the wings. The pier master was a little bit perturbed because he wasn't, shame on us, he wasn't directly involved, and he was a little bit upset that we were pulling this large lump of wreckage up over the railings and intending to store it on the pier. I think the air accident people had to placate him a bit to say that he didn't really have much option. They were carrying out an official investigation.
Much to the pier master's dismay, the wreckage was kept on the pier for the following week while the investigation continued. As well as being used for storage for plane wreckage, the pier has had other interesting uses in its time. The early days of the First World War saw the pier used as a landing stage for ships in trouble or with injured aboard. The most famous is the Chiara, which was torpedoed off the coast of Swanage in 1918.
The ship was leaving London, taking luxury goods and some bits and pieces back to Australia, and as it was passing by the bay here, one particular U-boat, U-boat 57, actually was going down channel and spotted it and probably fired one of the last torpedoes of the war. The captain tried to turn the ship to bring it ashore as quick as he could, or to bring it into shallower water, but it sunk in about 15 minutes. Several boats came in and bringing the injured ones in first. Unfortunately, one was very badly injured, and when they got him on the actual pier itself, he died. He was obviously an Australian crew member that was hoping to go back home, and unfortunately didn't make it.
Although a tragic story, good has come out of the wreck of the Chiara. Now used as a training dive site, it's one of the most popular wrecks in the south of England. In the summer months, as many as 400 divers a weekend flock to the dive school on the pier. With each paying a toll, it's easy to see how important a role shipwrecks play in keeping the pier out of the water.
Chiara is a good wreck in the fact that it's a big ship. So she's 425 feet long, sits in about 30 metres of water. The top of her still stands proud about 10-12 metres. So it's no wreck site is a safe wreck site, but it's a good wreck site to learn on. From the diving point of view, whether you want to do photography, digging for the likes of this, or just seeing the fish life, it's a phenomenal wreck. It holds just such a big stock of fish in the summer.
For many divers, there's one reason above all others which brings them to the Chiara. Treasure. Nearly 100 years after it was sunk, expensive French perfumes, gold-tip fountain pens, and gold watches are just a few of the items that divers still find and collect.
Some of the perfumes were, like say, expensive types. We've got early Chanel's going through Roger and Gallet, all the French perfumes. We've got some UK companies that we discovered a big box a couple of years ago with about 1,000 bottles of J&E Atkins, and they do one called Poppy. This was in 1917, and they're still making that same perfume now. So, which is quite mad. So we sent them one of these bottles because obviously they didn't still have these bottles, but they're really rare. So that's your perfume. She had a lot of perfumes on her. Bit of an old-fashioned smell now. These are fountain pens. Okay, bear in mind this ship was torpedoed. Okay, she's hit the bottom 30 metres down. Gold tip fountain pens. I've dug this one out of silt, I've dug several out of silt. You wash them through water and they write, they still write after all they've gone through. Go to the trench art. This would be a shell off a wreck, and that's a shell that somebody's sat in the trenches and they picked the pattern, a very intricate pattern. When it's polished, you'll see it's like trees and like shrubbery, and it's thousands and thousands of like pick marks that they've done with a bayonet just to take their mind off the horrors, basically. So someone's actually sat in a trench in 1916 or whatever and done that, and that would be personal cargo. And that's the stuff that when you find that on a wreck, that really spurs you on, because that's history, isn't it? That's real history. This is the lad who actually fired, he gave the command to fire the torpedo that sank the Chiara. Okay, he's responsible for several other wrecks that are in Poole Bay out here. So it's sort of apt really that he's framed in a frame on a ship that he sank. So he's the man. He's given the Swanage tourist industry a fair old go. Now, gold watches, okay? People like gold watches. People like gold in shipwrecks. It's something they enjoy. The weird thing about Chiara, okay, you never know what you're going to pull out. Okay, these are usually down in the silt because they're heavy. They'll sink down in the silt as the boxes they're in deteriorate. They sink further down. So you tend to put your arm down in the silt, but bear in mind you've got glass and stuff like that. You're fairly gentle, and then you feel the smooth. There's no mistaking gold because it's always smooth. So you feel the smooth. So you pull your hand out. Because you pull your hand out, you can't see anything. It's gone black. So you put that in your hand, and in the same hand hole down in the silt, I've pulled a gold watch out. I've pulled my hand back out, and it's falling apart a little bit now. But another bit of trench work. Someone's carved a little guitar. So you imagine you're 30 metres down. It's pitch black. You can't see a thing. It's all by feel, and you think you can feel a wooden guitar. So you pull that out. Okay, so that's coming out the same hole. You think, oh, this is really weird. You go down and you pull up a pipe. So you've got a pipe. Go back down. Another gold watch. Put the gold watch. So now your hand's full. Go down, and then you find a monkey nut like you would go down and buy now. Yet it's nearly 100 years old. So how can all that be preserved? Yet all be in one little handful. So there you go. It's a leap back in time. All this stuff connects us back. So it's just like a little time capsule, really.
It's finding these personal belongings which most excite and attract divers. As the pier becomes older, the costs will no doubt become greater, and the struggle to keep the pier buoyant will continue. But it's the people of the pier, volunteers, visitors, and lovers of this fine old structure whose passion will keep it going for future generations.
But it's important that we keep these things. I mean, it's important to the town, and it's important to the country as a whole.
I would be very disappointed to see the pier fail in its endeavours to keep itself in a well-maintained condition.
So many piers are being destroyed now. They cannot afford to keep them up. A lot of the privately owned piers are barely holding their own. It's the bigger piers and that sort of thing which are going quite well.
I'd like to see some other trade coming in, not superseding the divers. I think they must remain, but if we could only bring in some other operations of some sort.
Without Swanage Pier, I just feel that Swanage could just die.
You'd lose the tourism straight away because so many people just come to Swanage for a romantic stroll up the pier. You'd lose the fishing, the diving, and the pleasure trips when you get like the Waverley, the paddle steamer come alongside.
Paying 40 pence just to promenade up and down the pier won't pay for it.
It's a pretty cool structure, I think. That's why I like it, and we'll do what we can to keep it.
For many people, Swanage Pier is more than just a wooden structure. It's an old friend who shares their memories. It's part of their life. For others, it offers great opportunities to discover new worlds under the sea, to take part in old traditions, or to simply stroll the deck and indulge in some of its tales. Creaking and flexing, but standing strong since the Victorians boarded their paddle steamers, Swanage Pier has always maintained an air of dignity, resisting the constant attack of the wind and the waves and the dreaded gribble. But that is another thing altogether.